Don, can you come here, please?
Hello? Hello?
So this is a workshop, so who's, Jeremy, if you wanna, I know there's public comments, everything, but we never do, it's staff's workshop, so if they just wanna open it up, if people wanna talk, whatever it is an open forum, so go ahead.
If I may, I believe that there's an HOA meeting that conflicts with our workshop. So there's some residents that wanted to participate in public comments. If we can allow them to speak first, I know that that Ms. Reynolds is on Zoom. I think that she was one of the public comments that wanted to speak before her HOA meeting. Can we allow
Good
her to
evening.
speak?
Yes, absolutely. Public comments, it's in the agenda. And good evening. I see in my computer 5 participants. Just unmute yourself and welcome to the meeting. Name and address for the record.
Esperanza Reynolds, 8465 Mendies Terrace. Can you hear me?
Yes, Ms. Reynolds. We hear you. Good
Oh,
evening.
Okay, I'm sorry. First, we object to the lack of respect demonstrated to our community, for tonight is the annual HOA meeting, and yet you scheduled this workshop without any regard to the inner workings of other smaller governments. When we incorporated, the schedule was designed to not enter into this type of conflicts. Second, on October 23rd, we sent out certified mail, return receipt requested to 8 different entities, and we have received only 3 receipts back. It is inconceivable that 24 days after, we have yet to receive confirmation of the receipt by Town of Miami Lakes manager and council, just a few miles away from our home. We protest and petition for respect of property rights. Conduct a fair and free election of qualified voters only. Strict rules guide all cases where government is defending itself, but strict adherence to constitutional aspects of home ownership fail to have the same defined process, a violation of the town charter, which reads that the purpose of government is the protection of the governed and not the governing. The Optimist Park has 3 folios, 2 of which belong to the school board of Miami-Dade County. So what gives our municipal government the right to enter property owners into a debt for something that we do not own? School board, folio number 1, folio number 2, they're both for the school board. Miami Lakes only owns folio, and then the number I'm going to skip, which is at the end of the park. Whether it is $1 or $70 per year, the continual rise of taxes must stop. The bond issuance for town halls, stormwater, increase of Florida Power and Light fees, fines, permits, variances, enough. Finally, from the dais, we have heard the cry that this is done for our children, and we object to the manipulation of emotions of Miami Lakers. We are conducting a political campaign when you are conducting a political campaign when your constitutional sworn duty is to protect property rights of property owners and allow that the matter be determined only by those who will become responsible for the 30-year payment of whatever amount is finally decided to renovate the park. 68 property owners have already signed our petition and our protest. Therefore, we consider this public comments on behalf of the entire group. So rather than conducting workshops, what we're expecting from you is legislation that protects property rights, qualified registered voters only, and that means holders of title, ballots sent through the property appraiser's office to our homes, and copy of each affirmative vote sent to the property appraiser's office, because the only way to achieve consent of the governed is to actually follow the Constitution. Thank you very much for listening.
Anyone else for public comments? Please.
Good evening. Yes, good evening. This is Eddie Blanco, 6290 Lake Champlain. I was hoping to be in this workshop. I'm not sure if I've reviewed the documents that are here, but I'm not sure what the position of staff recommendations to the council are going to be. And if it's possible to comment after seeing the presentation, if that's a possibility. Or is this, do I need to speak now only?
Mayor and council, it is your decision, but
I think we're in an informal setting, so the hearing from the public at any point prior or after, I'm okay with it, and I think the mayor is, and so is. Yeah.
Absolutely,
fine.
Mr. Blanco. Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome, Ms. Introm.
Bonnie Centrone from Lewis Road, Miami Lakes. Manny is looking at his cell phone instead of looking at the speaker.
No, actually,
I'm sorry.
so my dad is in hospice, so I'm texting, trying to coordinate stuff.
Oh,
So
I am
not
so
I'd
sorry.
be looking at you. So
I'm really sorry. I know we all have some bad days. Anyway, to quote Ronald Reagan, there you go again. It feels like you're sometimes acting like an authoritarian regime. You seem concerned with your visions and your wishes without taking heed to the many voices of the property owners in this town. I have previously made a point about this issue having no place on a ballot whereby any registered voter in the town will have a voice. It seems like you're purposely dismissing the fact that this is the wrong way to proceed. I'll be happy to see the presentation, and I might even approve heartily of whatever is adopted. But it's only the property vote owners who should be voting on it, because they're the ones that have to foot the bill. How dare you, really, to take actions that would increase not only my taxes, but those of my child and grandchild to come if they choose to remain in this town. What you are proposing is in no way a necessity, and the park is only 30% owned by the town, and I just wonder what you're trying to prove by going ahead with the project in an improper way. I mean, yes, some modest improvements should be made, but the grandiose plans that you're trying to promote for costing millions and millions of dollars are really over the top. I seriously doubt that many property owners want to see their taxes increase, no matter how much or how little the amount would be. Today's brutal economy is enough of a punishment already. I could be wrong about that, but unless you do the right thing and ask only the property owners to vote on it, we'll never really know the truth. Either you genuinely believe that this project is a good idea and you don't care to know what the majority of the property owners think, or maybe you want to reward donors with lucrative contracts. I don't know. Whatever your motives, I contend that Miami Lakes does not need a state-of-the-art sports complex to enhance its image. Many of us liked it better before it began to grow beautifully. Now we feel, to paraphrase from Rodgers and Hammerstein's musical Oklahoma, we've gone about as far as we can go. Enough. I challenge you to vote in the proper manner, and we'll abide by the outcome. Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak now before the presentation? Please do so. Welcome.
Thank you. Ray Garcia, 6796 Main Street. I want to thank everybody for being here, the residents, the town staff, the council. I believe we have more in common here than we think. I think we agree on a lot as Miami Lakers. Number one, we agree that we love the town. We agree that we need to invest in the town in order to maintain the town, the standard of living that we have here, the quality of life. I think we all agree that everybody's vote counts in a democracy. We might disagree with the price. We might disagree with the amenities. Some people call it amenities, but actually if you look at it, it's really basics. You know, drainage, basic lighting, bathrooms, tennis courts, parking. I really don't see amenities there that would warrant it being extravagant. These are basic parks, infrastructure that are done all over this county, all over the state, all over the country. But I do believe that we do not want to go down the road of marginalizing residents. Once again, I am a renter, a leaser here. I would love to buy a home here. My situation, I have 5 kids, I'm divorced, kids in college. Many of you know that feeling. I'm just a regular guy trying to make it in Miami Lakes. I do well, but at this time, I really can't afford a home. I've participated here for years, decades, in Miami Lakes when it comes to sports and volunteering. I don't think anybody here would come up to me and say, yeah, you don't care about this town, you don't do enough for this town. I believe that I do. I believe I love it, and I believe I have every right to vote just like a homeowner, because my goal is to become a homeowner, just like thousands of renters who come here first because they want to live here and eventually buy a home here. So I would ask, please, argue about the price. Argue about whether we need it. But in the end, the residents should decide. We should put this to a vote. This is a major step in the future of Miami Lakes. And the voters should decide. We're giving them the choice. They have every right to say no. They have every right to say yes. But let them decide. Something this monumental should be allowed for a vote. And frankly, do we really want to be known as a town who marginalizes votes? I think that's not the Miami Lake way, it's not the Democratic way, it's not the Republican way, and it's not the American way, guys. Let's put it to a vote, and if we lose, if the park does not get done, well, we'll figure out another way, right? That's how we always do it. We figure it out. Thank you, and have a good evening, and God bless this town.
Name and address or no? Or you don't care who I am? Martha Mendez, 7,000 Glen Eagle Drive. I'm glad to see that 4 of our council members are so well versed on the Optimist Park that they found it not necessary to attend a workshop. I am ashamed of you. Not you 3, but the 4 that are missing. This is an investment that is a life investment to a lot of people in this town, and this is 4 of you are ignoring the impetus that this has on us. One thing I haven't, and I'm gonna wait and see the presentation, and I hope it's so different from what I've seen before over and over and over that I'm sick of it. My folder is this big. Where is the joint use agreement? How can you proceed and do anything to that park without a joint use agreement? It hasn't come before you. I haven't seen it. I've seen 17 versions of the JUA over and over, and it's very onerous on the community. And I haven't seen it presented to the council, approved by the council, signed by the school board, signed by the town, and then we proceed as to what we put in there. In my eyes, and I'm sick and tired of saying this, the land does not belong to us. If the land does not belong to us, we do not build any permanent structures. End of story. That's the end of it. Thank you.
Anyone else for public comments, or if you're virtual, again, public comments could take place now or could take place after the presentation. I don't see anyone else for public comments, so Mayor, I don't see anyone else
No, hand
So
it
we can
off.
start with the
Hand it off to
presentation.
Jeremy to start the presentation.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Today, essentially, this workshop is aimed at solely looking at option number 3 that we discussed at the previous workshop. The intent today, as we move through this, is going to be holistically only looking at option number 3 and those amenities and those lines of service and scope within the actual build-out of the option that has been presented to you prior. Let's see here. There we go. With us here today, as we go through this, these price points, and then eventually we'll get into some of the financials of it, we do have from Estrada and Hinojosa, Jacqueline Mesa, who works directly with Lourdes Abedin, who has been part of our finance team for our previous bonds and some of our financing. We also have from our design firm of Bermelo Ajamillo and Partners, Kirk Only. Kirk has been on the project since some of our more recent conceptual designs, and as we have moved through these rough order of magnitudes and cost estimates, has been working directly with the subcontractor that does provide our pricing at this point. As I had mentioned, the purpose of the workshop is to provide an in-depth look of option 3, its level of design and amenities for a newly renovated Miami Lakes Optimus Park. The goal is to get a consensus to talk over the level of design, detail, and specs prior to moving forward and trying to hone in on what the actual look of this park and what we want to move forward with is going to be. As we talk this over and some of the pricing factors, as I had mentioned in our previous workshop, these factors are presented to us by RIB US Cost Incorporated, who is a sub-consultant for our design firm, who are a consulting agency just for pricing and cost estimation for labor and materials throughout certain fields and certain respective construction projects. This cost estimate has actually been updated as of October 2021. So these are the most up-to-date pricing points, as well as the escalation numbers as we move through this and as we go through the commencement date of construction potentially taking place in 2023. So these numbers have all been updated since our previous workshop to take into consideration all the effects we've had in our economy, all the price inflation we've seen for both materials and labor.
I don't want to steal your thunder, but are we still at 17 million?
We are not.
Okay.
This project includes the construction of the 5 baseball fields, an arenasium, new basketball courts, expansion of existing parking lot, relocation of 1 Pinto baseball field, and new landscaping throughout. This order of magnitude is taken into consideration some of the design aspects that have been adjusted as of September, given the discussions that happened with option 3 in our last workshop. One thing that I do want to go ahead and make sure that I make clear is that these are all estimates. And as we have mentioned in the past, nothing is final until we actually go out, competitively bid, and get back the true pricing for the project holistically. So these are just market analysis of current industry averages prices, and all unit costs already include some subcontractor markups. So just diving right into it, option 3. Option 3, once again, is going to be the realignment of the 5 fields in a spoke design, having your centralized concession stand building in the center. All fields will contain batting cages directly adjacent to the fields, new dugouts, new drainage. We'll go through that now in the actual break and the cost breakdown. You have the addition of the 125 parking spaces. You have the upgraded tennis courts to include new fencing, lighting, benches, shade structures, the arenasium at the bottom, the relocation of Pinto Field B to move away from that corner intersection and place it more in the interior of the park. You also have upgraded landscaping, earthwork being done to create positive drainage throughout all the fields. And the lighting of all said fields to be moved to LED technology. So as we move through, and we'll actually dive into, I didn't put it here because it would have been not possible to show on the screen, but the idea now is I will go through the actual options and we'll go through the actual detail within option 3 And as I go through it, if there's any questions, comments, or concerns, we can go ahead and discuss it at that point. With that, we'll jump right into the fields. All the fields are going to be pretty similar with the exception of Field 1. Field 1 is the larger field. This field is anticipated to hold eventually high school games, and we foresee with some of our previous partnerships with colleges and potential professional teams, if we ever wanted to host a college at our field, this field is built to withstand that. So different offsets, distances, there's certain amenities. You'll notice that it is the only field that has 2 batting cages, 1 respective to each dugout and to each team. This is to include all of the grass, all of the infield clay, warning track, the cages, dugouts, fill material, and you'll see that throughout all 5 fields. As you may be aware, the fields are quite uneven throughout the park. The way it was originally created, it actually all leans into the center of the park, and that is the only drainage we have currently built into the park, to drain to the center and eventually over time move into the canal. So all 5 fields will be retrofitted to have subgrade drainage, as well as independent irrigation, which is something that also should be noted that is going to help us long term with the efficiency of how much water we're using and not overspraying areas that aren't really part of play fields. Are there any questions on anything pertaining to the ball fields, any line items that may stick out? One thing I do want to note for fields 2, 3, 4, and 5, there is a line there, perimeter fencing around field. The second one with safety top is actually a 6-foot fence. That was a typo and not an 8-foot for fields 2, 3, 4, and 5.
I don't have so much questions about the details. I mean, this is, we've gone over this, you know, and again, I'm going to date myself. I'll go back to when this project was $4 million, right? So I don't necessarily have issues with that. What I do have a problem with is we continue to increase the costs, which I think decreases the viability of this ever happening, right? When is too much, right? And then what I don't want to see are those 2 gentlemen over there representing the Optimist Club saying, we're back at square zero, because one thing that we have all agreed on is something needs to be done, right? Rather than spinning our wheels, right, and maybe chasing something that we'll never catch, is there any way for us to see, right, political polling, some type of measure to see, hey, will the people tolerate this? Because what I don't want to waste is another 1.5 years chasing something that may not come to fruition because the sticker shock is too high, and then those gentlemen there have absolutely zero to show for it. I don't want to waste any more time. And from everything that's been prognosticated to date, again, I started at $4 million. Going back to when I very first sat in the first workshop, I was sitting right where Jim Hamilton's sitting, and I heard Alex Ray go over the numbers, and now we're at 22 million. It wouldn't surprise me if we get even higher, right, because of what's happening in uncontrollable factors. Not on you, Jeremy. It's not on any of us. It's just, this is what it is. Is there any way to see if this is even palatable? Because I don't want to waste another 1.5 years.
Council member, when we presented this, whatever it was, 2 or 3 months ago, and the council took a motion and gave approval and said, we're picking option 3, go. And then the discussion at that time was, there were some questions about certain specific line items. I remember now Vice Mayor Rodriguez had questions about the trees, and this is the purpose of this workshop, was to go through the lines so we can say this is going to be our final version. So we can, number one is we're going to have to attach a final design with a cost estimate to the JUA that Ms. Mendez was asking about. That has to be there. So the JUA will be signed off with this is what the town wants to do. And in addition to that, the numbers, when we had that presentation 2 or 3 months ago, we did say, and that was, I think it was pretty clear, we repeated multiple times, that those numbers were numbers that were developed and they were a couple years old. So this is why we have this workshop, because we wanted to present to you the most accurate and up-to-date numbers possible. So the reality is that these types of questions to the public, to our residents, would without the proper education are destined to fail, right? Because if all you ask them, whether it be a poll from a telephone poll or a mailer or some other type of polling, if you just ask them, do you want to tax yourself to spend $25 million on a park, without knowing the specifics and the meat, the educational component is without a doubt the most important part of this entire process, because we're providing residents the information they need to make an educated decision. So I believe that if we were to do a test the waters type of poll, I think it's destined to fail without the educational component. That's the most critical part of this whole process.
This workshop right here is a perfect opportunity to educate the residents, and look what we have, right? The day the shovel hits the ground, that's when everybody is going to go up in arms, right? So this is my concern. It's a perfect opportunity to get educated, and nobody really cares until that tax bill hits or until somebody's at the ballot box, and by then, we've exhausted a year and a half, and if it fails, what's plan B? And I've had this conversation candidly with individuals from the Optimist Club. I'm afraid that we've reached that point where sticker shock may make this fail. I'm afraid, right? And then I don't want to lose the fact that we have everybody here from this end of the dais to that end of the dais agreeing something needs to be done, right? What we don't, and I think Mr. Garcia said it, what we don't agree on is maybe the pricing, right? And if we don't, we're representatives of the community, right? If we don't here agree on the pricing, I guarantee you, and we're the most educated, right, on this issue. We're talking about educating. We're representative democracy. We're the most educated on the issue. We don't agree. This issue may fail at the ballot box. So I just don't want to waste a year and a half. That's all. And I know we've been criticized for kicking the can down the curb, you know. So I just wanted to see how, and you explained it very eloquently, Mr. Peterman, and I don't, you know, I understand, you know, it's which came first, the chicken or the egg, so to speak. And I guess this is the path that we have to go to. And if it fails, great, you know, we'll come back to it. And if it succeeds, excellent, we'll just work from that point forward. But, you know, I wish that there was some way to prognosticate this a little bit better, but I guess we'll just.
Yeah, and I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. That's okay, Mr. Manager. Go ahead.
No, and the one thing that I would caution against is the going back to ground zero or step zero over and over again. This council took action, whatever it was, Jeremy, I don't know if you remember 2 or 3 months ago, and you said, option 3, go. And then we did at that time say that we were going to come back, ask the design team with their subcontractor to bring the numbers up to date, and there was some tweaking going on, and that's what our expectation was tonight, that we've already crossed that, we've crossed that bridge, and the council at that time, 2 or 3 months ago, said go with option 3, move forward towards a bond referendum next November. We were going to come back to this council with the up-to-date numbers, as well as the opportunity for this council to look at line by line in case they wanted to tweak a thing here or there, not a complete overhaul, because now we're going right back to square one. So that's what the intent of this workshop was, to look at the line by line breakdown, look and see what the individual amenities were, if there's going to be a general consensus that we tweak here, add this, or reduce this, little odds and ends, and then we come up with the final design and move forward and have it as an exhibit to the JUA, move forward with working with the partners that we're putting together towards the bond referendum with a number in mind. Now, this is the final design, this is the number, and we're moving forward with that. And that was the intended purpose of tonight's workshop, Councilmember.
Thank you. If I may, and I may have been the only council member that voted no on this when we voted for option number 3. And the reason why I voted no, and I know that we have representatives from the Optimist Club here, is for the reason why I voted no is because of the sticker shock. The higher this number gets, the less probable that this will pass at the ballot box. And so I did not want to see the Optimists end up with nothing, because I am a believer. My son played baseball here, 20 years ago, as many generations before him did, and there's little ones that are playing there today, and we've all heard this song and dance for the last 20 years, right? So something needs to be done. It doesn't surprise me that this number went from 18 to 22. By next year, it'll be 23 or 25. the number will continue to go up. I made it a point today to post this workshop on my social media, on the web, on the Facebook pages that, you know, Miami Lakers frequent. And per usual, it is the same 4 people in this room that are always here. So if this is a pressing matter to the community, and it was my argument with my colleagues, if this is a pressing matter that the community wants to move forward with, where are they? All of these people that want to get taxed to build this multi-million-dollar complete, you know, renovation, where are they? Why aren't they here asking for it? So to me, I know that we talk about an education campaign. I disagree with spending $100,000 on an education campaign. If this is something that the community really wants, then the question should be very simple. Do you want to tax yourself to the tune of, you know, $100, $150 a year to renovate this park? I shouldn't have to spend $100,000 of taxpayer dollars to educate or stimulate the residents to be more, for this to be more appealing, right? To me, it's borderline propaganda, and I really don't like that. It's something that makes me very uncomfortable, and that moment will come, right, when we start to prepare this paperwork to show to the community. I know that I've spoken to the legal department about it. It cannot be persuasive. It cannot be, you know, enticing one way or another. It's a very straight question. So I don't think that Councilmember Collazo is far off in saying, you know, why don't we kind of, you know, take the pulse of the community? I have the pulse of the community. I walk door to door. When I campaigned just 12 months ago, nobody asked me for this park. Not one resident that I knocked on their door asked me to renovate Miami Lakes Optimist Park. Not one, and that is not an exaggeration. And I knocked on doors of individuals that had small children. I knocked on doors of individuals that have children that play baseball. Their concerns were roads and sidewalks and trees and drainage, that kind of thing. So I think that we all have a pulse on the community, you know, with the exception of the Optimist Club that really utilizes this park and deserves some sort of renovation. It doesn't have to be $22 million. On the record, I was for the option number 1, which wouldn't have been $4 million, it wouldn't have been $5 million, it would probably have been 7 or 8, but not 22. So I fear that we're gonna go down this, you know, to me, I don't even know how to, Jeremy, I don't know how to pick and choose from this list of, I don't know how to pick and choose. I don't know what to get rid of. I don't think that we need, you know, 862 palm trees. I don't think that it needs to look like a resort. It's a park for children to play. I'm not interested in hosting, you know, baseball teams that come in from college, or that's not an interest to me. This is a local community park. This is not a sports complex for the northwest region of the county that is going to be funded on the backs of my taxpayers. I'm not interested in anyone coming here that doesn't live in Miami Lakes and doesn't want their child to play t-ball. Like it's a very basic need in my eyes. So I have I know that you guys have put a lot of effort into this, and I'm going to hear you out and going to look through all of these numbers, but I have a really big fear that this is gonna go on the ballot and people are gonna vote no. And then what? Then where do we go? I completely agree with Louis. Where do we go at that point? Do we go back to square one? I mean, at that point, what happens? A year and a half from now, we do what?
Yeah, it's just that everybody in life makes buying decisions understanding what the impact's gonna be to their daily life.
Right, and this is the worst possible time. We are being hit by inflation, gas prices. I mean, the individuals, taxpayers, voters are angry. They're angry in general because post-COVID, our world has turned upside down. So now I'm gonna put on the ballot a question, you know, can I tax you another couple of $100 so that I can put $22 million into a property that we don't own, so that a lot of people, you know, like Mirta Mendez and like Claudia and like Bonnie, they don't have children that play at the park. Why would they vote yes for this? So I'm afraid that the bigger the price tag, you know, the farther away this is really becoming like a pie in the sky.
Yeah, and the point I was going to make is, for instance, somebody goes to buy a car and they're going to buy whatever, a Cadillac, and they say, oh, it's $70,000. Oh my God, I can't afford 70. But you tell them, no, it's going to be, you know, whatever, so many $100 a month. Then they say, okay, in my daily life, in my monthly budget, I could afford this. Because if you, and I think it would be wise to just let Jeremy and his team finish up the presentation, but the annual costs are going to be $71. So that's really the for an average homeowner, right? So that's really going to be the question for the resident, the voter, when he or she goes to the ballot box, is going to say, is having this amenity in my town worth to me $71 a year? $5 or something a month, and That's part of the educational process. If we just tell them, oh, do you want to spend 20 some odd $1 million, that's gonna be where the sticker shock comes in. But if you break it down, which is you're not deceiving, you're not lying, you're not sugarcoating it, you're telling them real basic facts in a way where
Right,
they
but
can understand.
$71 is not a real number. $71 is for a homeowner, for the average homeowner, not for the individuals that live in Satori, not for the individuals that just bought a house in Loch Lomond, not for people that live in my community and just bought a house, right? You're talking about the average homeowner. There's a lot of individuals that are gonna pay more than that.
And many that are gonna pay a lot less than that.
There's a lot of people that are upset because they're paying, $5 more a month to fix the drainage. I mean, I've gotten a bunch of phone calls, people that are really angry because we raised the stormwater fee $5 so that you don't flood anymore. So, and that's a need. So, it's one of those things that I feel like, and I don't want to be, again, I didn't vote for this, right? So I did not vote for this option, but I just don't want to be part of the process that makes this become impossible. And the bigger these numbers get, the number has to be on the question somewhere on the ballot. So at some point, people are going to see 20-something million dollars. They're going to see it. And it's not just, it's not an initial investment. It's then maintaining all of these components forever, because then we have more facilities to maintain, more fields to, it's just, I just feel really, really bad about this.
Jeremy,
Mayor.
do you have more presentation? Or
Jeremy.
Yeah, I mean,
Jeremy.
essentially, it's to go through the actual, I'm sorry.
Yes, I just want to make the point that welcome Councilmember Fernandez and welcome Councilmember Alvarez. I know you're joining us via Zoom. Again, if you both want to say something, please do so now. Some council members have already spoken, or you can wait until the presentation is over. Thank you.
No, thank you, Gina. I'm ready to jump on, if allowable now.
I think he said he's ready to speak now.
Can you hear me or no?
You're on.
Yes, we
Sorry.
heard you. We heard you, and we can see you
I'm
too.
dealing with a time change too. Sorry can you hear me okay?
Yes,
Yes.
sir, we hear you.
So I just wanted to go on for the record that, I am in full support of improving dramatically our parks and recreational programming in our city. I was one of the council members that was in favor of option 4 as well. And I understand that the council was leaning more towards the direction of option 3, which I'm fine with. I'm not in support if we're going to move forward with this on option 1 and option 2. And I've expressed the reasons why. The other options have issues with parking and minimal infrastructure design. So if we're going to move forward with this, we should do it right. I know that we are looking at exploring the P3 option for indoor recreational programming. But again, we need to continue moving forward as a town. We need to continue thinking of how we're going to be able to offer programming for generations and generations to come, far beyond, my existence, far beyond Mayor Sid's, the rest of the council. And this is something that in our town, we lack. As a council member, I would give our parks and recreation programming, because of the limitations of the facility, a very low score. And we have an opportunity right now to send it to the residents and send it to the voters to decide what they feel is best. And, maybe the majority are with what I say, or maybe it's the minority of what I say, or maybe the majority thinks the way that Councilmember Ronald thinks, or maybe it is the minority. At the end, the public will speak, and they will drive the direction that our town needs to go with recreational programming. And don't talk to me about the size of the town and this and that. Listen, there's small cities that have amazing recreational programs, and one that I can think about is Miami Springs. We need to stop thinking of going elsewhere for recreational programming and bring recreational programming to the children, to the town, to the adults, to the residents, to the seniors, to the inclusive environment as well. And this is the opportunity to do so right now, as a council, as the mayor, to bring me forward. And I get it. Some people are like, well, I rent, and people that rent. I'm like, look, those are the dynamics of it, right? It is what it is. You can't change that. We're not gonna let be driven. We cannot be driven by what the minority thinks. I think the consensus is that we all feel that recreational programming, Parks and Rec need to move forward. That's something that I'm very passionate about. I share that same passion with other council members and not with some, but that's fine. We can agree to disagree, but my platform is public safety, education, and Parks and Recreation. And when I went to the voters, that's what I talked about. And that's what I'm going to promise. I'm ready for the controversy, but at the same time, you know what? I know that something bigger and something better is going to come out of it. And that is what we can do with this project and the potential that we have for our athletic programs, our recreational programs, and our extracurricular programs to add to that. So thank you, Dina, for allowing me really briefly to get in and just, again, share my comments. And again, I am in full support of option 4 or option 3. And if it is option 3, then I look forward to continuing to work with Jeremy and the mayor and the rest of the council on identifying partnerships to be able to put that indoor recreational programming with the basketball gymnasium, strength training, and additional extracurricular classes. Thank you.
With that, yes, Mayor. The continuing portion of the actual presentation is going to be the other facets of the park, not just the ball field. So moving into the site utilities, going through anything from domestic water all the way through the retrofitting of lights, the demolition aspects of it, the site improvements. So these are going to be more specific amenities within the park, including your new trail, including fire access gates, exercise stations. If there's anything in here that we want to question, and I know Councilwoman Rona brought up, if there's anything that may not stick out to you or you want further definition of, by all means.
Thank you, Jeremy. It says here there's a line item for resurfacing the existing tennis courts. Are we not doing that now?
So we are doing a topical resurfacing. So all we're doing is going to fill immediate cracks and then a repainting on top. This surfacing is stripping, full ripping out, and actually resurfacing the actual top layer.
So we're going to strip out what we're doing right now.
Correct. That was the original anticipated improvements to the tennis courts. Now that is obviously something up for discussion. If we see that once we go ahead and we just paint the top over and we have the new lines that we've resurfaced, if we want to remove that, that's for the discussion.
Okay. I guess we'll see when this materializes, the conditions that they have at that moment. What do you know what the life expectancy is of what we're doing right now?
I'd have to take a look at the manufacturer warranty on it. Okay. That was done before my time in here, so I'd have to take a look at that.
Okay, thank you.
There are, let me see, 3 things that I do want to note is just there are 3 other typos. None of them are on the bottom line figures. There's just some on quantities, and then in the site demolition, the actual order should be asphalt walkway demolition, existing basketball court is the next line, batting cage, and then the final demo is for the baseball pinto field in the bottom corner of the field. Any questions on any of the items? This is like the manager had said, this is where if there's anything, assets or amenities that we don't want to consider or want further description on, this is really the meat of the presentation.
The concession building, the new concession building that is in the center of the Cloverleaf design, that's here estimated at a cost of about $1.4 million. That is something that if we decided, if we removed that, or we removed potentially the Arenasium, that's $2 million that we can knock off of this project the way that it is. I thought palm trees were more expensive, but apparently they're not.
We actually, as of the last meeting, we actually went ahead and took away the more luxurious palm trees and moved to more common palm trees.
Appreciate that. This is something, if these 2 components were removed, this is something that we can do in the future. Would we still have the existing infrastructure? And again, please excuse me for being, for not understanding a lot of these things. I know that there's electrical and there's irrigation, and I'm sure that there's plumbing that's gonna be taken to that location, or is there already, plumbing
So there's
in that
sanitary,
location?
we already ran the lines.
That was done in the previous.
That was done previously, so there is already a line expected there. Now, one thing I will note, though, is there is room within the concessions before demolishing to reduce scope also. It's a large building set at 5,000 square feet, and given prior discussions, it's actually set for a two-story building. So that can be reduced if needed, and that's something that we can discuss. But right now, the concessions is a two-story building with the second story set at being a observation for public safety. If we have tournaments and need league officials to be there to make sure there's any crowd management, that was the anticipation for that.
Okay, thank you, Jeremy.
Jeremy, with regards to the site plan, and I know that you discussed this when we first talked about this particular option, the T-ball fields would have to be relocated. And I know you guys relocated the Pinto fields, but I don't see the T-ball fields identified in this site plan, nor do I see costs associated with the relocation of the T-ball fields. I know that currently there are portables in where you guys are proposing the T-ball fields, which would also limit that open space. You know, I practice at that park 2 or 3 times, 2 or 3 weekdays, and that open space is very important as well, just because you have flag football, you have soccer also practicing there. I know you guys have done all the calculations and you don't foresee any issues, but the T-ball fields right now are omitted from this site plan, and I wanted to, if you can walk me through how you guys plan to mitigate the practices of the other sports.
So with that, I mean, we are losing a thinner portion just north of the tennis courts to parking. However, we are gaining that entire southern portion just north of the school, just south of the tennis courts, that will now be open play. With that, as you notice, the T-ball fields are actually set up with portable backstops. Those can be relocated. We can place them out in those open play fields. The cost will be minimal as far as the creation of an infield. Those current T-ball fields are actually cut out to 4x4 clay per base. And actually at T-ball, if we wanted to, we can actually omit the clay and just have throw-down bases. So T-ball can be relocated to either that new open play field or even to the existing Pinto B field and then the other adjacent section of the church fields.
The entire proposal was so it can be net neutral, right? So you're not losing any fields.
Correct.
But if you put the T-ball fields there, you're losing that open space because you're going to have to reformat. I mean, typically, I don't see the soccer teams playing on the T-ball field because it's a little constricted on the size. So if you, I understand what you're saying, just put down rubber bases, but I think then we'd be going back, right? We'd be losing that amenity of having the actual clay surface, the actual bases. You know, I think the kids, coming from a T-ball coach, right? I think the kids appreciate feeling that they're actually playing on a baseball field rather than a rubber mat. So I'd like to see that be something that we're not losing. You know, as it is right now, we're losing that T-ball field. And I understand what you're saying. Oh, you know, we can flip it and you know, we can take the portable backstops. And I think that's, you know, that's a mitigating effort. But, you know, I do see this as something that's not net neutral. I see it as we're losing 2 baseball fields that we're currently using for T-ball. And I think that's a disservice there. So I'd like to see how that's going to be worked into that open space design.
Okay, definitely. We can look at just implementing those fields as they are in the current locations in the new updated open play fields. Any other questions on level of design, any of the aspects of the amenities? The next portion of this, let me actually catch up, is there are other facets that were not part of option number 3, but they have been items and discussions and topics brought up from the council previously for some of the items for Optimus Park. And I kept them in as an add-on just for consideration. These are not part of the total $22 million project. These are going to be 3 other items, which one of them is potentially up for discussion of a P3, which is the gymnasium. There is previous talks of solar panels and trying to get us onto a solar grid as far as energy efficiency and keeping us in line with our strategic plan. There is also the addition of a splash pad. That was items discussed previously, and looking at our offerings as a Parks and Rec department, these are some items that I just wanted to keep here if there are any considerations for them moving forward. The breakdown is on the final page of the budget sheet for those add-ons.
And Council, if you look at page 13 has the multipurpose building and the splash pad in the design. The space, even with option 3 without that, the space will always be retained, that even at some future date, both those physical structures can be erected after the fact. Obviously, the cost of construction because of mobilization and other things, it may be a little higher, but at least the space will always be retained there, and that decision could be made down the road.
And as the manager mentioned, there's the outlook, just showing the floor plan if we were to add those 3 amenities, which can be phased in at a later time. With that,
Jeremy, before you
yes.
continue, walk me through what a splash pad is.
A splash pad is basically a soft surfaced, it's going to be considered a wet structure. It's where you have those jets of water coming out. You have some canopies that drop water. It's not a pool. It is a stable
Like
surface.
Like a little water park.
Correct.
Understood.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, keep going. What we're going to go ahead and move on to, as the manager had already alluded to, is we also brought, with the new pricing, we also had the financing numbers reran by our bonds and financing team. And I'm actually going to pass it over now to Jacqueline Mesa to go ahead and talk a little bit about, at this new number, what we would be looking at for the average homeowner and what the millage impacts would be down the road.
Good evening. So based on the new numbers, so that's not including the add-ons. So we're looking at the 22.3 million. Once you add the cost of issuance, which is bond counsel, disclosure counsel, those costs plus underwriters who's going to sell the bonds, we're looking at a 22.7 total. Given today's current market, that's 2.48 interest cost, percent interest cost. So that's where we are, which if you'll note, it's less than we did in the August meeting. That was at a 2.54. So the market's gone down a little bit. So based on that, the average annual debt service is 1.1 million for the next 30 years. Now what that means to homeowners, you're looking at a debt millage impact of 0.3073 for that total. And if you did an annual cost per $100,000 taxable value, that's $30. But if you're looking at the average cost based on the average taxable value of a home in Miami Lakes, that's $233,000 roughly. The annual cost is 71, which I believe you mentioned that earlier.
Yeah, and I know we mentioned it the last time they were here and presented the financial and the financing options, but we got to remember that this is not market value. This is taxable value. So these are homes in Miami Lakes. They could be $1 million home, right? $1 million home. They've had their Save Our Homes 3% for 20 years. So their taxable value is after a homestead, after any other second homestead, all of that. Ultimately, you come up with the taxable value. So this is not market value. This is taxable value.
Correct. Any questions? With that, I'll give it back.
What's the total cost of the bond after including
So
interest?
the total borrowing cost, you're looking at 22.7. So it's that item number on page.
After 30 years, how much do we pay back?
So after 30, with interest, you mean?
Yeah.
So total costings with interest, you are looking at.
1.1 times 30, right?
You're looking at 32.6. 32.6. Again, this is an educated estimate on current market. So a year from now, year and a half, we don't know what that is until we go to pricing.
Jackie, can you walk us through a little bit on the logistics on the sale? For instance, if the council gives us authority to put out a question to the residents of some number, right?
number that-
We're looking at 22.7. If we say not to exceed 24 million or 25 million or something of that nature, and the voters say yes, and we move forward, and at what point would we sell the bonds? Could it be after bidding out the job? In other words, the uncertainty of construction costs, I think, is something that the council's mentioned multiple times. Could it be the final, just because we have authority by the council and the voters to sell up to a certain number, doesn't mean we have to sell that amount of bonds, right? It could be just the amount that for the construction of the facility, right?
Right, so Lorenzo, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it could read not to exceed a certain number on the language.
Yes,
That goes
as
out in the
long as
reference,
there's
right.
a.
So let's say now you're looking at 23 million. So they would vote not to exceed 23 million. But that is your borrowing cost. That is the financing cost. That is what you are going to borrow, what you need. It does not include the interest.
And and I know we just went through it with stormwater bonds, but I don't know if the general obligation bonds, it's a different process. I know the stormwater bonds, but from the time the council gave authority to move forward, and we actually went to market and got proceeds in our bank, it was probably, I think, about 3 months.
It's
Would
an
this would be a
average of-
similar
It would
timeline?
be similar.
Okay.
It was an average of 3 months. Once approved, it's an average of 3 months.
My next question is less to do with financing and more to do with mitigating any cost overruns, or if this were to be contracted out, how could we protect the town from unintended expenses where we might then be in a situation where we're sacrificing amenities because, unanticipated costs, et cetera? Is there a way of bidding this out where the contractor's liable for cost overruns?
Yeah, and we tried, when we asked the design team and their subcontractor, the costing company, to put this together, we tried everything possible, right, to offset or to kind of forecast what potential construction costs would be, for I guess they would end up being the spring of 23. And in here, they put an escalation factor of 8.6%. So there's an extra almost $1.4 million in this price tag that accounts for the forecasted or projected increase in construction costs between now and
May of 2023.
May of 23.
During our executive session, I got a little passionate because of, misforecasting or misrepresentation of numbers. And I'm not saying that this is the case here, but I've seen where in like the Canal Bank stabilization project, right? We bid it out for a certain amount and we had to cut it short because we came up short. Let's say the contractor comes up short. Something happens, right, that they have to go. Rather than foregoing a piece of the project, can this be bid out and said, no, you're on the hook for that. We can't go up a penny more. We're not going to take the amenity away. That's what I'm talking about. If there's a misstep, there's a miscue, if there's a miscalculation, how can we ensure that whatever happens is not again something that we overpromise, underdeliver, or something that we have to take away from the park to make sure that it happens? I didn't know if there's if that is something where you can get some.
Yeah, and I think that Jeremy mentioned one earlier when Councilmember Ruano asked about it, which was, for instance, there are little, I guess, on the fringes, right, on the edges where you can tweak it. For instance, the center the center concession building. If worst comes to worst, we make it 1-story instead of 2-story. There's different little things on the fringes that could help us offset. The most important one is the escalation factor that they put in there of almost 9%, which I think is great. With the 59th Avenue project, we were forecasting years out into the future, right, which is more unpredictable. This one we're now in November, right? So we're now at the 1-year mark. So the risk is limited. Time is risk, right? So now we're only trying to forecast. So we're looking at almost a 9% factor in a year and a half. So I think that that is a big hedge, and there are little things that we could do. like, you know, 1-story instead of 2-story concession building and things of that nature. So things that will not make you go back on the fact that you promised a certain amenity and we didn't deliver it. It may be a little smaller, maybe a little, you know, different things like that, but we're going to deliver every amenity that this council promises the residents.
Is this something that we could also look at requiring performance bonds?
Yeah, that's on the construction side when it goes to bid out. You're talking about. Yes.
Yeah, I think that's more along the lines of what the my
Yeah.
colleague was saying. You know, just making sure that we're not. I understand that there's wiggle room in the budget and then there's wiggle room in the scope of the project, but you know, I'd rather not start cutting limbs off.
No, I concur 100%. We want to deliver everything that, you know, but in addition to the 8.6% escalation, there's also a 10% contingency for a lot of those overruns too. So you're looking at almost 20%, you know, hedging moving forward. So almost every construction project that we embark on has that contingency for unknown things, right? It happens a lot with the drainage projects. You start digging and you discover something that you couldn't forecast, you didn't know. So we always have that 10% contingency factor built into our construction projects. And this has $2 million for contingency and 1.4 almost. So $3.4 million of this is hedging against future price escalations.
Understood, and obviously, I mean, you can't foresee or cover, you know, every contingency. You could, you know, stick 2 shovels worth of dirt out of the ground and find the, you know, Native American remains or something like that, and you're done. You know, so.
Jeremy, you have a long way to go because I know there's other people want to follow up in public comments, I'm sure.
No, at this point, if there's no other questions or any clarification needed, I go ahead and I'll resign the podium.
Yeah, I had asked, when I saw the, I know Jeremy, you can take a seat. When I saw some of the prices, I was a little shocked. So ran into J.C. Alfonso, somebody who does this all the time. He's a town resident, and he offered to provide some insight and some recommendations. So he was here today. So J.C., if you can come on up. But yeah, he's a resident. When I saw these numbers and I ran into him, and I know he's at the park often, but he kind of does this. So I don't know if you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah. Thank you for the opportunity to perhaps just offer some recommendations, as Mayor Sid just mentioned. Town resident, but also part of the industry. Got teams that are managing similar bond programs and projects in Doral is one of them, and then Fort Lauderdale. So just a couple of quick things that I'll offer. I think the first one is when you look at a cost estimate like this, you know, and you see a lot of the pricing, some of it is really becoming unitary and probably coming from publications and not necessarily from hard bids, which is understandable at this point. You know, we really don't have a lot of detail. But what I would offer is that, again, as a recommendation, is perhaps that we take a look at something called the Pareto principle, which is an 80-20 approach where 80% of your consequences are basically based on 20% costs. And there's cost in here that is probably 20% of the line items that are affecting a lot of the pricing. For example, the lighting on the park, the electrical distribution. These are big ticket items that my recommendation is that at this point, and we've done it, it can be done, you provide some significant backup that is based on either vendor pricing or subconsultant pricing that I think gives a little bit of a better faith on what the number is, as opposed to like a means cost, which is probably what was utilized in here. So that's a quick recommendation to probably start thinking about, because again, at the end of the day, we have to prove fiscal responsibility, right? If this is going to get passed, you know, are these real numbers? Are we really basing our votes on something that's real? So that's, I think, my first comment. Overall, on the base, what I consider the base pricing. The second comment is that if there has been an increase in pricing, you know, from what we saw before to what we're seeing now, I think it is owed to this council, to the residents, on what the increases were. How did we get from a number to the other by perhaps going line item by line item and identifying what the changes were? I would like to see them, and I can't see them from this document. So I think that is worthwhile of an exercise for us to look at. Maybe just in a little bit more detail and kind of moving on is, I'm a little concerned about the escalation piece, and I'll explain why. 8.6 escalation sounds reasonable, except that if it's to the beginning of the bidding process, it's probably wrong. Because at bidding time, what the contractors are gonna do is they're gonna bid to the midpoint of construction. So I would recommend, and I don't have this detail to know whether it is exactly to the beginning of the bid process or midpoint of construction, I would recommend that we relook at this and we apply an escalation factor that goes to the midpoint, because that's the way it's gonna be bid anyway. Nobody's gonna bid a price up to today if you have a 2-year project or a 1.5-year project. So that would be my recommendation there, that maybe that gets revisited. And then the other part is, you know, when I'm looking at the add-ons and I'm looking at what's been developed there, I'm not exactly sure if this council is going to make a decision on that today, but I can tell you that you don't have enough detail for you to make a recommendation. I mean, 3 line items that are based on lump sums simply isn't enough. When you take a look at the splash pad, which you asked about a little earlier, I mean, in my opinion, I think 1.3 is high. I would offer that based on what we've seen in the industry recently, between $500,000 to $900 million is what we're seeing on splash pads. However, without knowing the detail of what this splash pad looks like, I think we're all better served if we do have a little bit more of that detail, just to better understand what the pricing is. I believe there's probably a typo on the multipurpose building, but we've already developed the detail on the other pieces of the base cost, so why can't we do it here? And I would recommend that it gets done so that we have a better breakdown of what the pricing is and really make a better and more informed decision, which ultimately I think is what everybody's looking for, right? I mean, how do we get this passed? Well, we pass it by knowing that we did our homework, that we have the detail, and that at the end of the day, we're fiscally responsible for the dollars that we're gonna be asking the residents to vote on. So anyway, just a few recommendations. Again, I'm a town resident and I've been following this. My kids play at the park all the time. So I'm a user, and obviously a passionate member of this community that wants the very best and make sure that whatever we're paying for is being looked at as being addressed, you know, properly. So I'm open to even provide some of my comments to the team, which, by the way, you have a great team. I know Bermeo and I know U.S. Ripcost. I've worked with them in the past. It's a great team, and I can offer those comments if it's worthwhile, or even make myself available for any further discussions if it need be. So I'm here to help. Okay, thank you.
No, thank you, JC. And even when we talked about the splash pad, I know Councilman Ronald mentioned it, and just hearing that expertise, how, you know, we had it at 1.3, but really the industry is between $500,000 to $900,000. I think for us, that's some really good.
It's worthwhile to just investigate a little bit more, see how the pricing came to be, see what the assumptions are, and then I think you guys can probably move forward with a better decision-making process, being a little bit more informed. Okay.
No, appreciate you, JC.
Yep, of course.
That gentleman spoke to my heart, and I'm going to tell you why. Because it's exactly what I've lived, right? How do we go from 4 million to 20+ million, right, in my tenure here, which is 6 or 7 years, and inflation hasn't, you know, so I don't know what the numbers are. You know, I trust everything that staff is telling, but, you know, and I'm sorry, sir, what is it exactly that you do?
I'm a program manager.
A program manager for a specific company that specializes in?
So I think you're actually currently, you guys are doing a park.
Yeah, I'm a program manager, so we manage these type of programs on behalf of my company, AECOM. So this is essentially what we do, oversight and providing, you know, this type of service of making sure that some of these things are being looked at on behalf of owners. Does that help?
You manage construction projects.
Construction projects, that's correct. Construction and really the process from the beginning, from this point on all the way through completion. Yep.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
But yeah, he's here as a resident, as a user. When I saw him the other day, him and I were talking about it. So
I have a
That's-
question.
Appreciate you, JC, for offering that.
You went through a meeting, we went through option 1, 2, 3, 4. You debated, you got it down, and you finally came up with option 3. Option 3 doesn't have the indoor multipurpose facility. Why is it in this? Why are you adding it on? You came to an agreement. Your agreement was option 3. Option 3 doesn't have solar panel systems, doesn't have splash pads, none of that. Where did that come from? Why is it every time we sit down, something comes up and you add it on, and add it on, and add it on? It's coming out of our pockets.
If I can interrupt you, Mita, that's a good question. Where did that come from?
So as I had stated before, because of the P3 conversations and the request for updating our cost, I made sure as a separate item, away from what the option 3 is, away from the actual in-depth, and that's speaking to a little bit of what JC mentioned with the splash pad. Those are just keeping the costs for other items that have been discussed by this council, have been brought up in other formats. Once again, I allude to the P3 conversation, just so we have an idea of what those costs are at the October 2021 figures.
So these 3 add-ons that Mita's talking about, we have P3s for those 3 add-ons?
Not for all of them. I'm alluding to just the gymnasium. Now, with the splash pad, it has been a conversation in the past, and that is something that we also went ahead and wanted to get pricing, so we are aware of what that would be. Once again, that's why it's an add-on, and this is completely away from the option 3.
Okay.
And then just while I'm up here, that price tag for the splash pad, once again, because it's an add-on, it's not in depth, not broken down like the rest. That is true. That cost is actually close to $900,000 with all of the other escalations and other multipliers, comes out to that 1.3 number.
So,
Sorry, Mita,
when
can
you
I,
put it all together,
can I,
you're down to, you're in the verge of $32 million. You're not at 18. That's what it's 22 and 10 million.
No, we're at 22. Let's make sure that the facts are accurate.
Okay.
It's at
The
22,
paper-
and there's 3 items there for the council to consider, that total 10 million. We're at 22, we're not at 32.
The paperwork
at
that
22.
the council gave you authority for 18. What happens now? You have to start all over again? Because that was the authority you gave him.
I would assume we have to vote on that again.
And the other question I had was the fencing on 67th Avenue. It just, I didn't like it, but. Thank you.
Councilmember Fernandez was going to add something, right? No?
Claudia Luces, 8220 Menteith Terrace. 22 million is where we're at now. That's right, Mita's correct, it was 18 million. Every single time that you guys discuss the Optimus Park, the price increases. Now we have a splash card, or park, or whatever it is that we have. Just wondering, when are we gonna put in the roller coaster? When's that coming? This is a simple fix. We talked about it before. Did the kids need dugouts? Yes. A concession stand. Where was the Optimus Park when the concession stand was being built a few years ago? When we spent $2.5 million on bathrooms and a concession stand, what, now we change our mind, and because we change our mind, we're going to build yet another building? Oh, and with an observation deck. Are we going to put a telescope in that one too? Come on, enough already. This is taxpayer money that you're talking about. I told you guys last time, if you want to dream, go ahead and dream with your own checkbooks. But enough is enough. Yes, we need to improve the park, but like it or not, it is a sports complex. We do not have enough parking in this town. We don't have enough roads to handle the current traffic that we have. Not to mention, let's not forget all the apartments being built on 57th Avenue. Don't think for 1 second that those kids aren't going to come and play in our community. More congestion on our roads. This town does not need that. It does not. And now again, we're at $22 million with add-ons. running recreational programs run by vendors who then profit on that. The Optimus Park makes money on that. And there is a person who has an interest in that because we have a business that directly benefits from that arrangement. So again, looking at how it's going to impact the taxpayers and how it's going to impact our quality of life, think this through, please. There's many things here that, by the way, are luxuries. And I'm very glad that people were able to take advantage of what we, Miami Lakers, as taxpayers funded, and that other people from communities were able to come and enjoy. That's fantastic. But you know what? I want to decide who I give my money to and not let government decide it for me. Sorry, but that's the way it works for me. I do believe in making choices for myself and not letting government make those choices for me. I do not need you to provide entertainment to my child. I will do so myself. So I think that this council needs to remember where it is that you guys stand, who you represent. It's the people here, not people in adjacent communities. And for many, many years, people have played on that field, including my son. And he had no problem walking to the bathroom. Like I've stated before, he's not traumatized either. He's just fine. And if the purpose is to exercise, well, let's get some exercise in. But we continue and we know what's happening here. Yes, campaign promises. Guess what? You didn't promise with your checkbooks. You promised with mine. And that's where the problem lies. Thank you.
I just wanted to comment about what you were saying, Councilwoman Morano, when you said, why aren't there people here? And I know just from talking to my neighbors, everybody is very, very interested in this. But you know what it's like. Everyone has their daily life, their work, they're busy. Nobody thinks that it's important to come to a meeting. You people are admirable because you have chosen to dedicate your service to the public. But just don't think because people aren't here that they aren't really interested in this issue, because they are. And there is a lot of comment every time I talk to people about it. And most people are very upset about it because of the tax issue.
I agree. And when we talk to people, they express that to us, but it's important for you to tell your neighbors that when we have meetings like this, they need to come so that the entire council can hear what the sentiment in the community is.
When you have a question and answer type of forum, people are far more willing to attend.
I agree.
And I think knowing that it was going to be a formal meeting where you had just public comments kept a lot of people from coming because they thought, well, what's the point? You know, you get 3 minutes, but you don't get to have any questions answered. I appreciated knowing that we could speak. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Bonnie.
Tony, I know you were here back then. If you come up to the podium, got a question for you. So I remember when we voted on the Optimus Clubhouse. Did that include, part of that discussion, did that include running the water and sewer to the middle of the field in anticipation for the center bathrooms?
Good evening, Tony Lopez, Deputy Town Manager. Yes.
Thank you.
Hey, my name is Jim Hamilton. I live at 8528 Glencairn Lane, Miami Lakes. To the council, I just wanted to say that this morning, after I had some emails from friends on the, I think it's the Food and Wine Festival coming up, I bought 2 tickets. I think it was $172 because of the transfer fee on the credit card. That's more than I'll pay for the park. So if any of my neighbors that go to the Food and Wine I hope you have money left over, because you probably went last year and you're probably going to go next year, because it supports a good cause, and that supports the town and their programs. So I think when people break it down, it's very affordable, regardless if it's 22 million or 25 million. If I can afford to go to the Food and Wine Festival or go out to dinner like we did last night, which we spent more money than, you know, on a family of four, I think the key is, as you've all mentioned, is it's an educational process. The people on my block, they have no problem of paying that type of money. And I'm not sure what the average cost is for the residents, what the tax base is, but I can't imagine it being much more than $175 a year. So it's all about budget. I think everybody that lives in Miami Lakes wants to have a nice place to live. If we don't do the improvements now, it's just going to get more costly. It's like maintaining your home. You might gripe about it, but you have to do certain things to keep it up. Otherwise, it will be worse later, or if it's not just needing a repair, it'll be needing a replacement. So, you know, we really need to tackle it while it's still, even though some people say unaffordable, it's still more affordable today than it will be in 5 years from now. So thank you for listening.
Jim, congrats on retirement. I know you announced today that the sports shop, after 48 years, is going to be closing.
Yeah, it's like a death in the family. And I am the business person that the lady alluded to that has benefited. I've probably benefited more from coaching kids than financial, but it's been a great 48 years, and I'm still going to volunteer for the Optimist, or still be active, so I hope to be up here and speaking to you in the future, but thank you for that.
Thanks, Jim.
Good evening.
Go
I
ahead.
don't know if
Good
I can
evening.
chime in now. Okay, thank you.
We hear
Can you
you.
hear me okay?
We do. We hear you, Mr. Blanco. Go ahead.
Wonderful. Thank you. I'm Eddie Blanco, 6290 Lake Champlain Terrace, and I'm here to speak. I'm not there in person because I'm just recovering from a cold. I didn't want anybody looking at me weird if I coughed, and I don't want to spread any germs. So, I'm here to speak on support of the Miami Lakes Optimist Park. Of course, council members and mayor, when you guys were running for council, you took the time to educate the public and campaign and to get voted for office, and you went out and encouraged people to support you financially in your campaign, and I'm sure you knocked on lots of doors and held up all those signs to get elected. And I hope you champion this park the same way. Because this is about the future of our town. And I see you all as leaders in the community, and I see many of your constituents believe in what you say and believe in what you believe in. And so if you stand strong and believe in what this is, why it's important, and speak of that in a way that you can, many of your constituents would follow your lead on that. And that's what I expect. I mean, there's always naysayers. There was naysayers at the town hall. There was naysayers at the development of the extension of Main Street. There was a time when the fear of cost of annexing the land west of I-75 took over the minds of many, and we lacked the vision at the time to persuade the constituents, right, to annex that land. And now what we have in place of that land is the city of Hialeah, who's created piles of houses stacked upon each other, and a problem that we would have prevented had we had the vision to spend the money that we needed to spend at the time to have that land annexed and properly developed. So that's what we're talking about here, really having the vision. There's been multiple studies that support the increase of value of homes that are in close proximity to parks. Parks are an economic booster. People come to parks, and after the parks, they go to have dinner. They go shop at local places for supplies and things like that. Go get ice cream at Menchie's after the game, those type of things. And that's a great revenue generating opportunity. The better the park, And the more facilities it has, the more likely it is to attract and host some awesome events. I remember growing up, we used to host a lot of great events that we don't host now, including like the Special Olympics. Making these improvements to the park will also curb some of the long-term cost of maintaining this park, like by having proper drainage, having better LED lighting. Those are going to avoid future costs, and long-term holding costs are going to be less. And also, the park is really not just a place for kids; it's a place for all ages. A walking path and an exercise place. It's going to be a great place to have. And we also think about like having this park. We lock down the JUA for another 60 years, and we protect that land from being developed in other ways, because we have no control of that land as a city. We don't own that land, as many people have mentioned. Yes, we don't. And perhaps Miami-Dade County School Board decides to sell that land. Then what? Who's ready to pay $50+ million for that land? I don't know. So that's my concern. Those are some of the points I think are valid to bring up. As it relates to who should vote, I'm a real estate broker. I'm a property owner, and I'm big on property owners' rights. And I understand the sentiment of some that say that only property owners should own. But that's a very dark time in our history in America, where only white men who own properties were allowed to vote. I thought we were past that. And it surprises me that we haven't passed that. No, that was an unfortunate time. That's been corrected by voters' rights. All citizens of the United States have the right to vote. All citizens of Miami Lakes will have the right to vote on this. And I don't think that's even a point of argument. I don't know where the other points that people are bringing up make any sense. I don't know the law that well, but I do know well enough to know that U.S. citizens all have the right to vote. And I don't think we should marginalize tenants. Tenants are good people. I'm a property owner and I'm a landlord. And my tenants know that when my property taxes increase, that's going to result in their property rent increasing. So we should have all our people voting. And lastly, when should we do this? And it's now. And there's never been a better time. The bond costs are low. Prices are going up. They're going to continue to go up, and we should not be surprised that prices are going up, guys. Yeah, 10 years ago, the property in Miami Lakes was about a third of what it is today. So it's not surprising that that the cost of construction are going up. So now's the time to do it. Please don't be the council that pushes this on to another council for more discussion and more thought and more deliberation and more. You guys have done a very prudent job. I think there's some opportunities. I think the gentleman JC brought up some good points about how we could be more prudent about that, and maybe some of those ideas can be brought onto the table. But let's move this forward. Let's get this park done.
Anyone else? Thank you, Eddie. Anyone else virtually that wants to chime in?
Mayor, I don't have her right now. She just texted me as Ms. Lynn Matos would like to participate. So maybe in the next 10 minutes, she's going to try to call.
I don't know. Councilwoman
Well, I just
Ruano
want for the record to know that
Councilwoman Ruano had some
she's
discussion.
trying. She's going to try to call in.
Councilwoman Ruano.
No, I just wanted to add that, I think that we've gone over this extensively. Mirta Mendez brought up an important question. When we voted for this item, when the council voted, was there a number attached to it, Mr. Manager?
No, the clerk and I were just taking a look at it. It was just to select option 3. So there was no, it didn't say up to this a dollar amount, or Gene is going to go back and listen to the recordings. Sometimes you can get a little more out of the recordings than the actual written minutes of the meeting. So the answer is, from the written minutes, it doesn't show a dollar amount attached to it. It just shows the option. But we're going to go back and listen, and we'll have more information from you. We can report back to you at the quasi-judicial meeting in a couple weeks.
Thank you.
To the point of the losing the T-ball fields, and there's going to be additional cost, since they were excluded from option 3, I guess that's not something to go back and revisit?
Yeah, remember that ultimately, the final thing will be when we put it out to bid at construction, right? So if we get a authorization, if this council moves forward with, and if you remember, when we first started talking about it, we kind of, I guess, put you on notice, for lack of a better term. There's going to be multiple benchmarks or milestones that you're going to legislatively have to vote on between now and then, right? So if the ultimate, when we get to the final time when the voters approve it and we're ready to now put it out for bid for construction, in there is where it's going to specify each and every little element and put it out for the construction. So at that point, we could add it in there. As Jeremy stated, I don't believe it's going to be a significant cost. We understand, we agree with you that there's no current element in the park that we want to lose in, obviously, a bigger and better version of the park. So we will make sure that the T-ball fields are accounted for somewhere in the final version of at the construction phase.
And I want to go back to the point that Councilman Fernandez brought forward with the performance bond. And some of it has to do with the fact of some of the information that Jeremy had put out in previous sessions. And it has to do with construction. You have received reassurances that this project would take no longer than a year. I appreciate the gentleman that's here that does this for a living. Is that consistent with what you know? For a project of this scope and size, is a year an accurate?
Yeah, a year I would say is probably tight.
JC, come up on the microphone, yeah, because I know there's people watching from home.
So I would say that a year is probably tight. Is it doable? Yeah. But you know, it also depends on how you procure the construction and design contracts. Whether you do a design build, whether you do a hard bid. I'm not exactly sure how it will be procured, but it's something to be considered. You can probably do it depending on how you deliver it. So I would say doable, but tight.
Yeah, and council member, just in the JUA with the school board, the JUA in all of these, they were willing to shut down, you know, the fields and everything for a certain amount of time, and we both agreed that 365 days was going to be the bogey. That's going to be the benchmark. We're going to get this done in a year, somehow, some way.
Right, so going back to the performance bond issues, right? So if it's not done in a year, I mean, it would have significant consequences to the Optimus Park, right? The programming that we have here. So I wanted to see, is there a mechanism where the contractor could be held, I guess, liable, or maybe even compensated, right, for coming within that target or even before that target? My concern, and I'm not a construction professional, I don't do this, I've been experiencing through government that whatever we start with is not what ends up happening, and there's always delays and overruns, and I just didn't want to see that happen here. And if there's mechanisms where we can protect ourselves from that, what are they and how can they be deployed to make sure that if 365 is what we're committing to, 365 is what we're going to get. If not, there's either penalties or incentives that can be built into that project.
Well, you can, I mean, and the town manager talked about the contingencies and allowances that you build into your cost estimates that will cover, on the pricing side, you know, some of those potential unforeseens. In reference to time overruns, there are contractual components such as liquidated damages, right, that you apply and you include in your contract that protects the town versus some of these extensions, you know, that are on the contractor side. So there are contractual pieces that you can do to protect you for those type of things. Now, again, as I mentioned, you know, you can develop a construction manager at risk delivery method that places theoretically the risk on the contractor, except for certain things like unforeseens and things like that. That's why I'm saying that the delivery method can impact your timeline depending on how you decide to procure and deliver a project of this type. So, and all of that really gets arranged in the planning phase. Once there is a method or a design that has been approved and everybody can agree on, then you start thinking about how do you plan and procure something like this to A, meet the contractual obligations of the design, and then B, adhere to a certain timeline that has been established.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, most of our agreements do have and do contemplate liquidated damages. That's something that's pretty
Right.
standard throughout most of our construction agreements and design agreements.
In previous construction projects, when we could have gone after the contractor, we haven't. There's been a reluctance to aggressively pursue the contractor. And I think we've seen that in some of the other projects, and particularly the project that's currently the clubhouse, right? We had some flaws there, and I know we would have had the opportunity to go after the contractor, but we chose not to. So I know we install them, but what we do with them, right? And I making my comments very clear on the record. If it's 365, it's 365, and that's what we're committing to, right? And not, let's see, that's the standard we should go after. So I've learned, right? And I wasn't on the dais at that time. I think the Mayor Sid was, but I saw what happened there, and I saw what happened with the contractor, and I saw that there wasn't really a willingness to maybe go after or utilize those protections that were in place. And I just want to make sure that if it's 365, that we make sure that that's the earmark, the benchmark that we're holding ourselves to, and that there's a consequence if that's not met.
Yeah, council member, there's a lot of stakeholders that all are anxious to make sure that it happens, right? This council is obviously making it very clear by what you just stated that we want 1 year. I hear you. I want 1 year. I'm going to hold Jeremy to a year. If not, Jeremy's going to, I'm going to fire him. But Jeremy, Tony, that whole team, 1 year. 1 year, the school board once a year, the Optimist Club for programming once a year. They have to make accommodations to move their programming for a year. So there's too many players involved, too many stakeholders involved for this not to happen. Now, obviously, if South Florida gets hit by, God forbid, a Category 4 hurricane, right? Then all bets are off. Then those are the kind of things that you have to take into consideration. But under normal circumstances, we're going to get this done in 1 year.
I would recommend, and Jeremy, I'll send some recommendations, but perhaps a preliminary schedule at this point makes sense. You may already have one, but you start drawing out the steps of what is planning going to truly take, what is design going to truly take. And then you vet that. You vet that to determine, is 60 days sufficient? Is 90 days sufficient? And I think it gets us to, a comfort level. I will feel more comfortable if I could say, hey, let me take a look at a preliminary schedule and see what that looks like. And if it exists, I'd love to look at it. If not, I would suggest that we maybe develop one to see. I think it can be done. I think in a year it could be done, but I like to plan things. I like to do things orderly and develop certain documents that allow me to tell you, whether it is or isn't. So, hope that helps.
To Councilmember Collazo's point, we're currently experiencing a lot of supply chain issues. We've had some other projects that have been delayed due to supply chain issues. I mean, I don't know how long that will continue, but if it does continue, if it's not something that's temporary and by the time that this project, hits the ground, that's still in effect, then 365 days sounds incredibly ambitious to me.
Well, there's mechanisms to based on what we're seeing now, and obviously is procuring some of the long lead items a little bit earlier than you would before, accounting for some of those components on your allowances and contingencies that was mentioned earlier. So there's ways to combat that, and everybody's had to adjust. As I talk to clients throughout really the nation, everybody's concerned about the same issue, and how do you anticipate that? Well, you budget it in your schedule. You start looking at pricing a little differently in order for you to account for it, because we don't know. Could be a year, could be 2 years.
Right, we have no idea how long.
So you adjust, and I think that the estimate does have escalation clauses. I've talked a little bit about my concern there. I think it should be looked at, but also some of these allowances that you see probably will include some of those concerns in your cost estimate, or the cost estimate that was developed.
Have you seen those issues around in projects that you're, yeah? Got it.
Okay, thank you.
As long as this council allows, if we have to.
Thanks, JC.
We'll do 16-hour shifts, 24-hour shifts. We'll yeah. Windmill Gate will be yelling, but we'll make it work.
Mayor Miss Lynn Matos is online. She's waiting patiently to speak. Ms. Matos, do you hear us? That is her. That's her number. She called. Ms. Matos, please unmute yourself, and you can start speaking. I'm reaching out to her. 'Cause I know she called and Don put her on hold. I see her number. It's the one reflected on the TV screen. Okay. We don't have her anymore. She just left. Anyone else?
Thank you. Ray Garcia, 6796 Main Street. I just wanted, after hearing everything and what JC was talking about, I just want to comment on that approach. I think the carrot and stick approach is the way to go if we're going to hit 365 days. What I mean by carrot is we can include milestones that the contractors have to reach, also in the development phase and planning and everything, and also come 366 days, and not all of the contractors will be open to this, but the ones who do bid will understand there will be penalties. I just recall some projects that I did that we included that first day. We started penalties. You could do a percentage or a fixed amount, depending on the total amount, but if they know there's penalties coming. Now, there is a difference between projects done 5-10 years ago, which is supply chain. We have to hold that into consideration. But I think the carrot and stick approach really answers the questions that Mr. Collazo had, and also Ms. Verano had, and a lot of the residents have. How are we really holding people accountable to the tax dollars? So I just want to agree with that type of approach. I think that's a way to mitigate this as much as possible and hit those deadlines. And I know the town manager and staff take that into consideration. And again, thank you for letting me come up the second time and speak to this matter. Thank you very much.
Any further discussion? Is Lynn still there?
We noticed that she came in again and then she left. I'm trying to see if we can let her in.
Lynn, if you could
I
unmute
see
yourself.
her number again. Yeah, she just called again. No, right.
Go ahead, Claudia.
Right, Claudia Lucis, 8220 Menteith Terrace. On the issue of the paid partnerships that was discussed, do have a question. Because I'd like to know how that functions. If we have, let's say, a company who's going to come in and they are going to invest millions of dollars into one of these buildings, what do they expect in return? Are they going to be given the opportunity? Are they going to be given contracts to then run particular sports programs there? I just kind of want clarification on that because I haven't heard how that functions. Is it directly going to then kind of compete with what the Optimist runs right now with some of the programs that they run? Just so we can get clarification on that.
I asked that question, and I was told that all of those things, all of those terms would be negotiable, depending on each individual agreement with the partner that is wanting to invest in the town. I'm sure that Jeremy can speak more to that. But all of those terms are negotiable. Some will have contracts, some will not. I mean, it depends on what we want.
So then the sports programs, then they stand a chance of them being kind of being run by other companies as well.
Right, if someone comes in and builds a multi-use facility on the property, they are going to want to run their own programs.
Right, because let's face it, no one does things for free.
Correct, it's a business, yes.
Exactly, it's a business. So, okay, so then at that point, then we may have programs there being run by different then organizations?
It's really, really way too premature to even discuss those things. We understand the concern. The 3 unsolicited proposals that we've received so far are so early in the process. None of those terms are even close to being discussed.
But is it like an expectation? Would it be reasonable to say it's an expectation that they're going to come in and invest millions of dollars and expect, a return on their investment, right?
Well, anybody would, right?
Okay, all right. I just wanted to make sure it was a reasonable expectation.
Right. Ultimately, if those expectations conflict with policies of the council, then we'll walk away from them. It's not just because somebody provides us or submits an unsolicited proposal, promising all these pie-in-the-sky things. If it doesn't pan out and it doesn't conflict with the policy decisions the council does, then we move forward. If they conflict, if what their expectations are conflict with what the council foresees and directs, then we walk away from it. It's that simple. It ain't
Right,
that
for
complicated.
example, you can have the Optimist Club running a baseball program, and at the same time, you can have ABC Basketball running a program out of the building, and then you can have, XYZ Tennis Club running a program out of the tennis
Right.
courts. You can have multiple.
Right, because if I'm not mistaken, I think Optimus has run maybe I might be mistaken, basketball at some point.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so if somebody comes in, then they may then at that point, that vendor may want to provide those basketball services.
Potentially, if someone comes in
Potentially.
and builds a building in exchange for a basketball program, then that's something that the council.
That's a reasonable expectation.
Right. At that point, then that's part of the negotiating process, and we either
So then the
decide
council then
yea
at
or
that
nay.
point has to determine who they're going to prioritize, whether they're going to give it to the Optimist to run or give it to the vendor.
Correct.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Madam Clerk?
Yes, I have been informed that Ms. Matos was driving here, right? Again, I was just
Any other
informed.
feedback, questions from the council to staff?
While we wait for Lynn, and I think it's important that we do, because she's a strong proponent of the park, and she is a very good community partner to all of us. With regards to the educational campaign, and I know that it's premature, I know that I've spoken to our legal counsel about it, and I believe that I've spoken to the manager about it too. But with regards to the information that we're going to be putting out there to educate the community, will we have a say in what is written, how it's written, and will we be approving what is put out there?
Absolutely. Prior to anything being put out there, as far as a question is concerned, the legal team, myself, together with probably Mr. Albert del Castillo, will work on the language to make sure that it conforms with the law, and it is something that can come back to the council for approval before it goes out. So yes.
And and the $100,000 in the educational campaign, what would that be comprised of? Like what?
Yeah,
what would-
that $100,000 budget was not only for educational. It was for, financial advice, legal advice, the educational campaign. I think do you remember Jeremy? I think it was in the $30,000 to $50,000 range for the educational component, which is multi-pronged. So it's more than just, hey, we're gonna hand out flyers. It's multi-pronged. And Lorenzo can correct me if I'm wrong, but we are forbidden, and I know that was a concern that you raised, we are forbidden from being advocates from the town side. Residents, any of you individually you could be advocates. We, as the town, we can't put public money behind advocacy. We can educate. So all we are providing are facts and information so that residents are as educated as possible before they pull the lever one way or the other.
That's
Okay, so
correct,
then
Mr. Manager.
I'm sorry.
Just saying that's correct.
In the $100,000 that we originally saw, that's not just for education. That includes attorneys, legal counsel fees for, because I was under the impression that the
No,
fees would be way higher than that.
No, that's including the cost of the ballot. That is including any other legal fees as we get the actual language in order. The cost of the financing team, I believe, as well. And then a portion of it is actually the education, the website, putting together the workshops and different components of the town. All that's encumbered, but it's not just education.
Yeah, and that gets us to Election Day. If it passes, then there'll be, similar to what we did with the stormwater bonds, there'll be legal and financial advisory costs to actually go to market, right? So if the voters say yes, and now we gotta.
Understood. So
there's
then
gonna
these
be some
legal
other.
fees are strictly for the education campain, not
And
for the
development-
bond.
And the development
development
of
of the
the
language
question, in
of the
conjunction with
question.
our own in-house legal, those are what our projected expenses are to get us to Election Day.
Understood, and that's why I'm confused, because when we did the bond for stormwater, the legal fees were way higher. So that's why these is just to write out that question.
Council, remember, this is a two-step approach. So when we were talking about the stormwater, it was being done here. It wasn't something that
Correct.
was required by the law to go out to the voters. Again, because they were not ad valorem monies, it was
Correct.
revenue funds. So yes, it was a lot more because it's not only the actual preparation of the bond. And here in this case, we're doing a bond question that has to go out to the voters. So there's a lot of legalities, a lot of things that we need to do as far as ensuring that the correct information is going out to the voters, that the correct questions being posed to the voters, that all the information, all the T's are crossed, all the I's are dotted. Once that's already been accomplished, then it comes back to you in a form that it's already been approved. And then now we have to go out and actually develop the financial part of it.
Right, so then there's gonna be cost twice. One, to put the
It's not that
question,
it's cost twice, it's just it's a different way of getting to the same end result. So
Right.
this is a two-pronged approach.
correct, correct. So then there's gonna be a cost associated with developing that question in order for it to be legally on the ballot with the right language and whatnot. And then there's another cost when we go out to bond.
So once we've gone ahead and we've gotten approval from the voters in this referendum, right, that we're able to pledge these our general obligation dollars,
Right.
then there's the second phase of the financing.
Understood, thank you. Ms. Matos, we've been waiting for you. Come on up.
I want you to know I ran in these heels from RE/MAX. The moral of the story today is don't park in Sir Speedy's parking space. They're great neighbors, and leave your flashers on for 4 hours, because guess what happens when you're racing to get to Town Hall? I'm Lynn Matos. I live in Windmill Gate. I heard the comment online about the noise you're all going to be making, so you're going to be tired of me before this is over, right? 16340 Woodwalk. I've been here before. In fact, I started my journey with the town of Miami Lakes speaking in front of the council regarding the Optimist Park, security, lighting, renovations, 2007. Great cities have great parks. Every great city has a great park or parks. They do. I heard comments about we have no children to play in the parks. I have no children that attend the schools, and I pay those in my taxes. We've been debating about how many dollars per household. If we'd have done the park when the park should have been done, it wouldn't cost 10 million, 18 million, 20 million, 30 million. Do the park. Do the park. Great cities have great parks. I said it before, build it and they will come. You know what? We want them to come. Why do you think your property values are so awesome? Because Miami Lakes is a great city. And you might have knocked on doors and nobody said they wanted to renovate the park. Believe me, the residents of Miami Lakes want the park done. Have you been out there when it's flooded? Have you walked the trails? I'm doing Food and Wine on February 5th, 8 days. 59 tickets from a sellout. Do people want to come to the park? They do. Can you imagine what that park could be? If there's something that can't be done, then we don't do it. But don't let this go. Don't let this go. You know what happens? Has anybody seen the park in Hialeah that used to be the Optimist Park? What happens if we let the park go and the school board stops doing their part? We stop doing our part. You know what happens? Somebody comes in and buys the land, and then what happens? We have something developed on the jewel that is the Optimist Park. It's time. Thank you for waiting for me. I think that, you know, as I was running down the sidewalk to get here, I thought how blessed I am to live in a community whose elected officials care about the voices of the constituents and the people who live here. Did you care? Did you care enough to wait for me? I don't speak just for me. I've packed this room before with people who care. Somebody said there's not very many people here. How many people knew about the meeting? I had conflicting times about the meeting. Thank you. Do the park. Great cities have great parks. Thank you.
Anything else from, thank you, Lynn. Anything else from the council? Anything else from the council? Seeing none, this workshop is complete. We'll adjourn. Have a good night, guys.